Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. My name is Vincent Totoro. I'm the CEO of CXO Nexus. Today we're going to talk about vendor analytics and the CXO Nexus vendor analytics platform. Just a little background for today's webinar. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about CXO Nexus and a little bit of a slideshow and some of the challenges we see in the industry. And then I'm going to jump over and give you a live demonstration of our platform. So CXO Nexus, we are a software as a service analytics platform that utilizes proprietary AI and machine learning algorithms to clean, classify, and categorize technology spend. Now, CXO Nexus is a bit unique in the marketplace is because our platform works at the product level. And that's an important distinction because performing vendor analytics at the product level gives you the ability to do some really key value added analysis. The first of being the ability to report on original equipment manufacturers and products being sold by resellers. Another important analysis that we can do based on the product level is our ability to classify technology spend into easy to understand categories such as storage, networking, security, and compute. And lastly, one of the other use cases we can provide by working at that product level is to expose unmanaged IT. You know, you hear that expression, it's often referred to as rogue or shadow IT spend. You know, many organizations will define technology spend through an aggregation of cost centers or GL accounts. Since CXO Nexus works at that product level, we can find technology spend regardless of how it's booked within an organization, whether someone's using non-technology accounts, using their credit card, or perhaps as a result of recent merged activity when you want that immediate view into a subsidiary organization. Since we're at that product level, we don't have to wait for the consolidation of general ledger or cost centers to do firm-wide aggregate reporting. The solution I'm going to show you today addresses the difficulty of answering that seemingly simple question of what do we pay our vendors? And CXO Nexus does this by exposing all that product-rich data that's typically trapped in ERP systems. We pull all that data out and we make that data actionable. Many organizations struggle to answer that seemingly simple question I just asked of what do we pay our vendors? And that's typically due to the inability of firm-wide ERP systems to provide the necessary detail to answer that question. Simply stated, you know, accounts payable does a great job of telling you who you're paying. The purchase order system will report on who you're cutting orders with. But neither of those systems report on what you're buying and from who are you buying those products from. Companies that try to solve this challenge internally or through some of the other options available commercially often run into these types of obstacles. They quickly see that the data they're pulling from their ERP systems needs to be augmented, and they try to do this manually. Doing that, you know, they quickly realize they can't keep pace with the transaction volume. They delay their ability to report in a real-time perspective. So when they generate their reports, they're typically out of date. You know, lots of companies that try to solve this reporting need. All their sources come from siloed data sources where you might have procurement trying to generate a report, IT finance trying to generate vendor reports, accounts payable trying to generate vendor reports. So that means we have multiple versions of the truth, and it's also often very difficult to resolve what individual departments are reporting around their vendor spend. Internal efforts often lead to inconsistent categorization because the categorization of IT spend, as I mentioned before, is often dependent on cost centers or general ledger accounts, and that leads to human bias and an inconsistent categorization of technology spend. Do you consider converged infrastructure to be storage or compute? Do you consider WebEx to be communication or an end user device? Through our automation and applying standard taxonomies, we do away with all those challenges at CXO Nexus. Our patented machine learning model um, drives the analysis behind CXO Nexus. We have an automated ingestion process that's agnostic to upstream data sources. We've imported data from Ariba, Coupa, Oracle, general ledgers, proprietary data lakes. So our flexible ingestion engine allows all the normalization of that data to come into our platform, where our automated driven AI analysis clean classifies and categorizes that spend using natural language processing and supervised and unsupervised machine learning. Through the identification of original equipment manufacturers, and a consistent classification of technology spend, again at that product level, our Insight Analyzer and an Insight Visualizer provides a unified view of an organization's IT spend, allowing for better visibility and decision making. And because the CXO Nexus platform operates on a monthly refresh cycle, we offer persistent monitoring and up-to-date reporting on technology vendor spend. And lastly, and most importantly, the CXO Nexus data leads to outcomes that generate or impact ROI. Our patented TruSpend vendor reporting provides deep visibility into all levels of purchasing. We capture direct and reseller spend. We provide accurate original equipment manufacturer parentage to provide maximum negotiation leverage across your vendor landscape. The categorization of IT spend into a standard taxonomy allows our users to look for overlapping technology and to identify where vendors are competing in that same technological space to enable vendor consolidations. Our cost center views allow the identification of that unmanaged technology spend that often happens outside of the business segment of technology, and that allows our users to eliminate redundant purchasing. And lastly, the CXO Nexus service is automated. There's no FTEs required. It's a real-time software as a service platform that allows real-time monthly views into your data. Before I hand it over to Dale, who's the director of our commercial services organization in CXO Nexus Europe, I'm going to jump over to our platform and provide a demonstration of our CXO Nexus automated vendor reporting system. Just let me figure out my share button.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, thank you, Dale. Okay, so when you log into the CXO Nexus platform, there's a couple of different reporting options. For the length of our demonstration, I'm going to spend most of my time on Analyzer and Visualizer because I believe that'll give you the most robust understanding for what CXO Nexus does and the analysis that we provide. Insight Analyzer, although this says demonstration data, this is actual data that we've ingested from a client that we've anonymized to show what we can do with actual information that, in this case, we've ingested from accounts payable. This is 3 years of information. We're looking at an aggregate view. I will break it down by year as I progress through the presentation. This organization shared with us $2.8 billion of vendor spend. That is firm-wide vendor spend. The reason why we like to ingest firm-wide spend is because one of the things I mentioned earlier is that CXO Nexus has that unique ability to identify technology spend regardless of where it occurs in the organization. Because our AI algorithms will interrogate that $2.8 billion at the line item level looking for technology spend. It was 134,000 transactions across almost 5,000 vendors. It is of that $2.8 billion, our algorithm to determine that $597 million of that $2.8 billion was technology-related spend across 51,000 transactions and almost 1,400 parent entities. When I drill into the panel, there's a little bit of a breadcrumb report that you can keep track of how I'm drilling into the data. Our drill path for this presentation will start at the parent manufacturer. It will drill into the original equipment manufacturer and then the supplier of record to show you how CXO Nexus can unmask those resellers and show what is actually being purchased across that value-added reseller community. If I click on Cisco and drill into that vendor, not only do I see Cisco, I also see the family of companies that are part of the Cisco organization. So as our algorithm found Cisco spend, we also found spend for Splunk, Meraki Solutions, and App Dynamics because they're a part of the Cisco family. And again, CXO Nexus is about providing maximum leverage for all original equipment manufacturers. If I drill into Cisco, I'm now at the supplier of record level in this vendor chain. So of that $41 million in Cisco spend, I can see $17 million of Cisco purchasing coming through CDW, $7.6 million being direct Cisco purchases, and then you can see the rest of the value-added resellers engaged in selling Cisco gear, Presidio, Dimension Data, NTT, so on and so forth. And if I do this final click into CDW, I'm now at that product level that I mentioned before that differentiates CXO Nexus in the marketplace. It's being able to identify technology products at the line item level is what allows CXO Nexus to unmask resellers and take that product spend and bring it back to the original equipment manufacturer. So our algorithms are going to recognize wherever a Catalyst 9300 network endpoint device is purchased, whether it's from CDW, from SHI, or WWT, we're going to recognize that product as a piece of Cisco gear, and we're going to roll it up accordingly to the Cisco original equipment manufacturer, giving you maximum leverage with understanding what you're buying and from who you're buying those products. Simultaneous to identifying the original equipment manufacturers and the parentage that exists for vendors in the marketplace, CXO Nexus will also categorize those products into a technology business management hierarchy. This is a technology business management hierarchy that was developed by the TBM Council. It's a group of industry professionals that advise about best practices on accounting, chargeback for IT, and budgeting for IT. This is what I affectionately call the tech stack. And this is really important because it starts to show our clients how each vendor is embedded in their tech stack. And this is really important for our clients because this is where they really can start to identify where vendors are competing in the same technological space, where are the opportunities to consolidate vendors, where do those niche vendors exist that typically charge more on a unit cost basis? How can we roll them up and get unit cost economies by purchasing through preferred vendors? I'm going to pick on security and compliance and drill into this category. And here you can see all of the security vendors providing security and compliance services to this particular client. If I drill into F5, so the drill down for here, you can see I'm starting at the category. I drill into the original equipment manufacturer parent. I'm now at the OEM. With one more click, I'm now at the supplier of record. And here's a challenge that I mentioned earlier, why the firm-wide ERP systems are so ineffective in being able to provide this type of analysis. If I was a CFO for this organization and I wanted to understand what I'm paying in terms of F5 networks, how much am I spending with that company, I'd be really hard pressed to figure that out because here you can see that all the F5 purchasing is happening through WWT and Red River Technologies. So if I turn to accounts payable looking for that spend, I'd be missing $8.2 million because I wouldn't have the ability to mine my value-added resellers looking for F5 networks. The same thing if I turn to procurement looking for that spend, I would see orders going to WWT and Red River Tech, but I wouldn't see them rolled up into showing me what my full purchase is for F5 gear. And if I do this one more click on WWT, again, I'm now at that product level, which really differentiates CXO Nexus in that we know those Viperon blades are part of the F5 network hardware. And that's how we know, regardless of who the reseller is, we can roll that technology up to the original equipment manufacturer and put it in a category that makes sense. So you can see what you're actually buying, who you're buying it from, and how it exists in your technology stack. All of these graphics are interactive, excuse me. If I wanted to look at all of my resellers, I can just simply click on the bar and I can now set my filter to WWT and I can see all the different technologies and the original equipment manufacturers being purchased through WWT. If I wanted to look at CDW, SHI. Interesting to note for SHI, it's significantly less money, but much more complex in the number of vendors and products being purchased through that particular reseller. If I wanted to flip the axis and understand of my OEMs, what value-added resellers am I using to procure OEM technology? I could just click on this other graphic. And if I wanted to look at Dell Technologies, and I could set my filter to Dell and drill into Dell, and I can see all the different resellers that are selling Dell kit, WWT, SHI, Dimension Data, so on and so forth. One example I also like to show is to compare CXO Nexus to typically the challenges that lots of companies see by having to report on vendor data through accounts payable. I'm going to pick on a particular reseller, in this case, CDW. And you can see that within accounts payable, CDW is carried some 15 or half a dozen different times because of the different remit tos that oftentimes accounts payable personnel are required to enter into accounts payable. Sometimes accounts payable professionals don't even check for the existence of a vendor, and they might set up duplicate vendor instances. So to run a report for CDW for this particular client, you'd have to make sure that you run a report for all of these different AP instances of CDW. CXO Nexus normalizes all the vendor names as a part of the out-of-the-box functionality we provide. So to single click on CDW, I can pull in all my purchases to CDW. And if you were trying to run this report from accounts payable, that's where your analysis would stop. You'd see $31 million to CDW. But in actuality, through CXO Nexus TruSpend reporting, you can see that the CDW story is really one of Cisco, Dell Technologies, Pure Storage, and Barracuda Networks. Lastly, I'd like to talk a little bit about resellers. Uh, for large corporations with a lot of technology sprawl, this is typically a substantial issue that lots of companies have to deal with. You can see for this particular client, almost 29% of their spend was made through the value-added reseller network. So getting visibility into what is being purchased in that reseller network is very challenging for a lot of our clients. Well, once was for a lot of our clients. Many organizations, to understand what they're purchasing from their value-added reseller network, have to go to those resellers and ask for reports of what they're purchasing. CXO Nexus does that out of the box. On this particular reporting tab, we list every vendor and we reflect how much is directly purchased from the vendor versus how much is coming through the reseller network. And we can just click on any one of these. We'll click on Dell this time, drill into Dell EMC, and you can see $25 million in direct purchasing from Dell, another $15 million in purchases from that value-added reseller network. We provide trending based on TBM classification. Here you can see what the annual trend is across the technology business management hierarchies. This is useful. You're monitoring trends. You may be migrating from storage into converged computing, and you want to monitor the migration of that spend from, the storage category into the compute category. We also do trending by vendor. If you're offloading one vendor and migrating to another vendor, you can look at that trend over time as well. Being at the product level allows some very interesting search criteria within our platform. Um, if you were interested in a particular product, I know this particular client used for our demonstration purposes are big Power Edge users. I can perform wildcard searches. And if you think about billing that comes from vendors, you can search for any description that may be on that line item detail to provide further insight to what you're buying from any vendor. So I just did a wildcard search on Power Edge servers in the Dell area, and now I can just drill into my Dell purchases and my wildcard set to Power Edge servers. I can now look at every instance of a Power Edge server purchased from Dell, SHI, Redcom Designs. Again, we're doing our wildcard search at the product level, irrespective of the vendor of record. So we're able to navigate across the different myriad of vendors selling a plethora of products, and we're able to bring that all together in one unified view of our application. If I was interested in looking at maintenance billing, I could just do a wildcard search for maintenance expense. And earlier we saw those F5 blades being purchased. I can drill into the F5 OEM down to the supplier of record, and I can see F5 maintenance being purchased from WWT. Our ability to expose unmanaged IT expense is excellent in that all the transactions we bring in from a client are tagged to a cost center. We can bring in the cost center hierarchies from an organization and replicate the business segmentation that that organization performs to report on their books and records. So in this particular case, we first saw $597 million of technology purchase. 551 million are centrally procured through the technology organization. And then you can see the other departments purchasing technology as well. And we can drill into marketing spend. We can pull in the unlimited limits of, how many levels of a hierarchy an organization may have. It's transparent to us. We can bring in that whole reporting structure. And I can see the marketing department is spending $20 million in technology expense, almost $11 million in the application space, $8 million in the end user space. I know this client end user kit, iPhones, laptop, monitors, pretty much fungible technology expensed right out to the business units. But the eye-raising report here might be that why are they spending $11 million in applications and software? Maybe that expense should be brought over to the technology group. I can drill into that category and I can see what types of software packages are being purchased. A lot of these packages look like they are marketing technologies. They're MarTech companies. They're doing ad servicing, client demographics, customer services, customer surveys. It probably makes sense that these expenditures should be in the marketing group, but one might ask, why aren't the acquisition of these software packages going through technology? They may need to be vetted for security and compliance and things of that nature. The last thing I'll show before I hand over to Dell is a quick view of our InCight visualizer. Our InCight Visualer is just that. It's just some intuitive heat map reporting that looks at relative size of vendors, classifications of technology spend. Something really interesting I'd like to point out in this view is you can see our reporting based on parent manufacturer. You see the larger vendors are Cisco, Equinix, Dell Technologies, so on and so forth. If I flip to the normalized supplier name, these are the names we're getting from accounts payable based on the supplier of record. You can see the larger vendors are now the value-added resellers, WWT, CDW, SHI, Presidio Networks. Huge challenge for this organization in understanding what was being purchased from that reseller network because they just didn't have the product level telemetry on what was being purchased from these resellers. You can see with the advent of our CXO augmented data, you can now see those value added resellers get synthesized back to the original equipment manufacturers to maximize your leverage with those entities. We can also chart the relative size of the technology business management hierarchies. What are you spending most of your money on in the vendor space? Is it compute? Is it data centers? Is it applications? We can also chart the cost centers as well. Okay, so that's some background about the CXO Nexus platform. We talked about some use cases, outcomes that generate ROI. We did a quick demonstration of our dashboard and how we can drill down to line item product detail for each vendor. I'm now going to hand over to Dale, who runs our commercial services organization in CXO Nexus Europe. And I think he's going to share some real-time experiences he's had in working with entities to save some money. Let me go back to my PowerPoint presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vince. And good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having everyone here. That was really impressive, Vince. And thanks ever so much for taking us through a live demo. So I think one of the things that we're getting feedback from our clients is that single version of the truth and making sure that it's absolutely the clarity, the telemetry, as you've used that word, Vince, with regards to the spend. So in a second, I'm just going to bring up some stats for you and really just wanted to share with you for the last couple of minutes before we move on to the Q&A. And please do put some questions into the chat window or the Q&A session. Just wanted to share some of the real sort of on the ground stories that we're getting from CFOs. Had a lunch with a CFO of a large insurance company a couple of weeks ago, and she was just saying that I need to know what I'm spending my money on. I need to cut back in certain areas so I can invest because I've got to deliver all this AI stuff. And this is kind of the anecdotal that's happening. So if we take a look on the right-hand side of this slide, and I think these are just important for markers, in the UK and European markets, 6 to 8% of IT spend as a percentage of total revenue. Now, that is for business services here in the UK, and that does include financial services. So to put that into kind of a monetary value, organisations are spending £30,000 or 36,000 euros per employee on IT per year. And as I say, that does include financial services, but £30,000 will get you a very basic Bloomberg terminal for a single trader. So even though that does include financial services spend as an outlier, it actually is demonstrating that there is a lot of expenditure going on in IT. And one of the stats that really jumped out when we were looking at the analyst reports and the ground data that we're seeing is that IT spend growth has not dropped below 5% since 2020, and it nearly peaked at nearly 10% last year, and it's set to be another 5 to 10% this year. So you can see that the investment in IT is only going one way. The amount per employee is only going up. So the three areas that we're really seeing a lot of focus from our partners and from our end clients is the three areas on the slide. Shadow IT spend, which Vince has kind of mentioned a little bit in the demonstration, tail end spend management or optimization, and supplier consolidation. So taking these in turn, shadow IT spend typically before 2020 was around about 1% of total IT spend. That's predicted to be 4%, in some instances even as high as 5% by the end of 2025. So it's seen a huge growth. Now, in and of itself, is that a problem? Well, yes, it definitely creates a problem for CFOs and financial directors, end of month reporting, etc. Because this is indiscreet spend. It's really hard to track. It's post event. So normally it's a 3 to 6 month lag before this actually then kind of pops up on spreadsheets, etc. So it's really, really hard to kind of nail down where is this spend happening, who's actually making this spend. And the reason for this growth, some of the areas that we're seeing that growth coming from is SaaS applications, so being bought on people's credit cards and then being put through expenses. AI tools, huge explosion there. So people using AI tools for productivity and automation. Marketplaces, so not just the big Azure and AWS marketplaces, but also Salesforce and some of the more industry specific marketplaces. And also just the classic, to bypass procurement because there's a perception that sometimes it takes too long to do this via procurement. The reason for calling out shadow IT is that this also then has obviously financial risk, but it also has data privacy and security risk. So if you don't know what people are buying and how they're buying it, and using, say, an AI tool that's not been authorized and pre-vetted by security, that's in your systems, it's being used by your users, and it's really hard to capture. So this is a report that we can generate really quickly for our customers. Linking into that is tail end spend optimization. So this is typically sort of 20% of the total IT spend, but normally across a really, really large number of suppliers. And as Vince has mentioned, that can be the OEMs, that can be distributors, resellers. It can also be where it's outsourced or part of a managed service contract. So lots and lots of transactions, typically a lot lower value, ad hoc spend, discretionary spend, purchasing of maybe new equipment for new joiners, as Vince has mentioned, sometimes for particular marketing events, marketing data, etc. So lots and lots of activity. It's not fair in a lot of organizations to expect procurement to be across all of that. Typically, your procurement functions and teams are working on the 25% of top end spend. So the big suppliers, the big contracts, the big annual renewals. As a result, by definition, tail end spend sometimes just gets to the point where it's just unmanaged. And some of those vendors are never even spoken to. They're part of an auto renewal. There's RPI plus in those contracts. So there is a lot of opportunity to make optimization. And as organizations are transforming, maybe moving more workloads to the public cloud, or they're disposing of certain entities, it's making sure that that spend is actually for what's needed in the remaining organizations. So tail end spend is a really key focus for us at the moment. And then finally, supplier consolidation. And these are obviously all slightly linked in terms of spend focus and how to actually drive optimization. But we're seeing a lot of technical overlap in our customers in terms of the suppliers. So for instance, and I think we use Cisco in the demo, in certain organizations, you could be buying exactly the same router or switch or firewall or access point from anything up to, and we've seen as many as double-digit suppliers. All on different rate cards, all with different payment terms, or with different terms, conditions, maintenance clauses, RPI plus, etc. So the ability to consolidate that into your managed vendors, as opposed to maybe being with unmanaged vendors, gives you an opportunity to actually put more of that spend with one supplier to drive a better negotiation on the per unit price. It also just means that you've got less risk that can be adopted as a result of that, because then it should be that you're able to focus on those suppliers in a more managed fashion. So these are the kind of three big areas that we're seeing at the moment, and these are actually dealing with organizations on a month-by-month basis, and are able to then become, as I say, that single version of the truth. So I just wanted to share those details with you today. And we'd love to talk to you more and love to see how we can help you. And if there's any questions that you've got for us today, please feel free to post them in the chat window, or alternatively reach out to us, and we'd love to either set up a meeting and give you a deeper dive, take you through a demo, or even talk to you about how we can, within 3 or 4 weeks, we can start giving you the clarity you need to get hold of your IT spend. Many thanks.
Thank you, Dale. I do see some questions. One question I see right off the bat is, can CXO port its augmented data into our internal dashboard? The answer of that is yes. As you could see in our presentation, we use PowerPoint to display our reporting. We are a data company. We pride ourselves in the accuracy of our algorithms to provide that augmented data to assist our clients in understanding what their vendor technology landscape looks like. So yes, all of that data is exportable from our application. And we do have some clients now that have asked us to develop APIs to share that, to improve the way we share the information back and forth. So the short answer is absolutely, we can make our augmented data available to your internal dashboard. Another question I see is, how quickly can you deliver results and usable data? I can answer that question in terms of a range. It's all a function of the quantity and the quality of the data we receive, because as you recall in my earlier presentation, when we take in data from a client, that data goes through our AI and machine learning algorithms in both a supervised and unsupervised learning capacity. Now, what that means is when we bring in client data and we assign, whether it's a category or an original equipment manufacturer attributed to a product, all of those AI decisions get assigned a confidence interval. And if the confidence interval is below a certain number, that information gets kicked out to a group of curators and review the data. So that's why my answer, how quickly can we deliver results, is typically within 2 to 3 weeks. I give you a range because, again, it's predicated on the quantity and quality of the data. The more kickouts and supervised learning we have to perform elongates the data. But typically, in our experience, it's fairly quickly in that it's 2 to 3 weeks.
And Vince, I can see in the chat we've got another question, which is what is the process for onboarding a new client?
So onboarding a new client is, we refer to that as our integration process, where we have a group of integrators. We'll meet with the client and we'll discuss the data requirements to enable a successful implementation of our platform. You're never limited to what we suggest. That's just the basic requirements. We'll review all the content. We'll ask our client to generate a sample file report. And what happens then is our group of integrators will perform that mapping of the client data to our ingestion engine. That mapping only needs to occur once, and any subsequent transmit of data from that client, our integration engine will know exactly what to do with that data. It lands in our secure AWS location, and our automated ingestion engine sweeps that data and begins the processing.
Excellent. Brilliant. And we've got another question from an anonymous attendee. So we have several organization and product views we have to manually create outside our internal systems. Can this type of data be incorporated into the CXO views?
I'm sorry, can you read the first part of that again, Dale? I want to make sure I answer it correctly.
Yeah, so we have several organization and product views we have to manually create outside our internal systems. Can this type of data be incorporated into the CXO views?
Yeah, so we may need a follow-up question. So we do have clients that have a lot of different organizational views. Some are product based, some are location based, some are management based. There's management hierarchies. We are absolutely able to take in all those different relationships and report on them. The only thing that we do not do out of the box is if you wanted to change our technology business management hierarchy. That is a standard hierarchy that we do not change, because one of the functions we'd like to provide that's in our roadmap is to be able to provide our clients with category benchmarking. And if anyone's ever done benchmarking, the hard thing to do when comparing your spend against peers is making sure that you have apples to apples comparative data, because everyone accounts for their technology spend a little bit different. That's why we provide that standard lens. But we do have instances where clients have come to us and have asked us to grow our hierarchy to include other categories. That's not out of the box. That's available as a customization. I hope I've answered that question. So we can
Well,
take those internal product views and
yeah.
sometimes augment ours.
Okay, so I think they've added a bit of supplementary information. So what they've said is our line item descriptions are very vague. Do you have alternate methods to categorize data? So I think you've kind of answered part of the follow on from there with a bit of extra classification.
No, well, the reality is we really are dependent on that product level information, right? Because that's how we determine who an original equipment manufacturer is, or whether if that product, is a piece of storage hardware, or is it a blade server that goes into the compute bucket, or is it a laptop that goes into our end user technology. So because we're very focused on products, if you don't have good product telemetry in there, there's things we can do around rolling up vendor spend, but you're going to lose a lot of visibility because we're so focused on being able to report on the what is being purchased and how it's being purchased.
Excellent. I think there was a couple of other questions. I'm just scrolling around now. Can we define our own classifications of technology spend? I think I know the answer to this one.
Yeah, no, that out of the box, no, because we apply that standard taxonomy, as I mentioned before, to provide that transparency across peer groups who elect to, try to do peer benchmarking. We do have instances where a client, I'll give you the real example. A client who's in the media industry came to us and said, "Hey, Vince, we love the transparency you're providing in the technology space, but we have a bigger problem in broadcast technology and digital content and distribution." So that was an instance where we partnered with their client. They gave us some seed data that we were able to train our algorithms around, and we now expanded that taxonomy to include broadcast tech and digital content, but we really don't change our own internal technology hierarchy. But having said that, we do have clients that like to view their own product hierarchy alongside of ours. We can take their hierarchy and report it alongside our data.
Fantastic. Excellent. I think, just double checking, we've answered all the questions that have been posed. I'm just checking in the Q&A. I'm just going to check in the chat. So if you want, how quickly deliver us? Yeah, you've answered that. Yeah, no, I think we've covered all the questions on the two methods that people can pose today. So I think hopefully we're reaching a conclusion today. Unless there's any other questions from anyone. No.
Okay, well, thank you all very much for attending our webinar on CXO Nexus and vendor analytics. I believe we made our contact information available. Please reach out directly to Dale or myself for any questions. And we're absolutely available for any demonstrations for, if you find specific needs within your organization, you'd like CXO Nexus to come give you a personalized demonstration, we'd be happy to do that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vince. That was wonderful. Thanks, everybody, for your time.
Thank you, everyone.